All right, let's look at a sort so that we can see if we understand all the different characteristics of the divergent, convergent, and transform boundaries. I'm going to start with my 3 pictures. I want to look for the clues. Remember, we always said we're looking for the clues to decide what kind of boundary it is. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to look at this first one. Well, I see that the arrows are moving away from the middle. So they're separating or dividing. I also see that magma is coming up from the mantle. So I know if it's dividing and if there's magma coming up and making it spread, then it has to be a divergent boundary. I'm going to put this right here, a divergent boundary. All right, I'm going to look at my next picture. On this picture, I see that one plate is moving toward me and one plate is moving away from me. So they are moving in a side-by-side direction. So I know that that only happens at a transform boundary, where they slide past each other. And finally, I'm going to look at the clues on this one. I see that crust is going back into the mantle. That's a subduction zone. I see that I have some ocean and some continent, and I see that I have a volcano. And I know all of those happen when one thing crashes into another one. So I'm going to put that at my convergent boundary. All right, I'm going to pick my next one. This says forms mountains. Well, I know transform boundaries kind of tear up or rub against each other, so that's definitely not going to form mountains. I know at a convergent, I could have subduction, but I can also have continental to continental, which crashes into each other, moves upward, and actually does form a mountain. Divergent, I know it forms something, but it's not really a mountain. It's more like a really small mountain called a mid-ocean ridge. So I believe that this is going to go under convergent because that actually forms mountains. All right, here I have rocks that line the boundary are pulverized as plates grind together. So pulverized means that they're destroyed. Okay, so divergent, I know that I'm creating crust, so I don't think any rocks are going to be pulverized or ground up. Convergent, well, it's going back in, so it's going to be melted, but again, it's not going to be ground up. But if I'm having 2 slide past each other, they're definitely going to grind together. So that can happen at a transform boundary. All right, here I have 2 plates coming together. Okay, my key word here is coming together. Okay, come together, collide, crash, converge. So I know that can only happen at a convergent boundary, because a divergent boundary, they're dividing, and a transform, they're sliding. All right, oceanic crust is made of basalt, and it's created. Well, I know that oceanic crust is only made where the seafloor spreads and that new magma rises and cools off. So that has to happen at a divergent boundary, because at a convergent, it's going back into the mantle and melting, and at a transform boundary, it's just getting ground up. So let's see. This occurs where 2 tectonic plates move away from each other. If they're moving away from each other, they must be separating or dividing. So that has to go under divergent. All right, and let's look at this one. Earthquakes happen here. Well, an earthquake can really happen anywhere, but it's most likely that an earthquake is going to happen when 2 plates rub against each other and they grind up those rocks. So earthquakes most often happen at a divergent boundary. Let's see. We have a chain of mid-ocean ridges that form where the seafloor spreads apart. Well, converging is definitely not spreading apart. And transform is not spreading apart. But divergent, we know, is dividing or spreading apart as the magma comes up and says, hey, make room for me. So I know that has to go under divergent. And I know volcanoes can sometimes form a divergent, but we don't talk about that much. And they really can't form at a transform boundary because that's where we're pulverizing or grinding up. But a convergent, almost always with oceanic to oceanic or oceanic to continental, forms a trench, a subduction zone, and a volcano. And finally, well, we know we only have one spot left, but let's look at it. Two plates sliding past each other. So if they're sliding in opposite directions, we know that has to be a transform because these are separating, these are colliding, these are sliding past. So those are the great characteristics to study when you're thinking about all the different plate boundaries and what happens at each boundary.